Well, essentially here is going to be to give you a brief background on the program and to, I think first order importance would be to see where the program stands as of today and whether it has been effective or not. And the second order importance would be to look at what the program can do better in terms of achieving the objectives that were initially set forth. Just most of you would know this already. When we and this was referred to in the first panel itself, that India lags behind other developing countries in terms of both school enrollment, schooling attainment, as well as health status. So these are figures we're looking at 2003-08. So they're of course a little bit dated, but we give you the context of when the program was introduced and it became operative nationwide. The first reason why, the most important reason why the program was introduced actually was to improve the enrollment rates, to improve school participation, to make schooling more attractive for children. And the second objective of the program was essentially more to alleviate hunger rather than improve nutritional standards. So if you just look at these figures, going back to the early 2000s, the enrollment rates in India were pretty low. They've of course improved quite a bit in the last decade or so. But you're looking at other countries which had similar growth levels economically in terms of GDP, like China and Brazil, though they are middle-income countries. Despite similar growth rates, economic growth rates, we've not been able to get where they are in terms of educational attainment. And in terms of health indicators, of course, we are far worse than these countries and even worse than sub-Saharan Africa. So the figures that we're looking at in terms of health status are for children who are under 5. But we have to keep in mind the fact that the school meal program was introduced in primary schools, not targeted at pre-primary children. So just to give you a background, the idea was that every public primary school was mandated to provide these enrolled children free cooked meals on school premises of within certain norms, which was 100 kilocalories and 30 grams of protein on each school day. But this transition's taken a long time. And as a matter of fact, the figures that were presented in just the last, the presentation, you still don't have national coverage in terms of regularity, in terms of ensuring that these norms are met. But at least on paper, it was in April 2004. It was only by that time that we can claim that the nationwide transition took place to implementation throughout all public primary schools. And as a matter of fact, something that a lot of us are not aware of is also that the mandate since then has been extended to implementation also in upper primary schools. So this is to till grade 8, so 6 to grade 8. And this was in 2007 itself. And so I've done work in Delhi, for instance, looking at the meal program here. And it was only in 2009 that this mandate got extended. So there would be large proportions of the country, public primary schools, which would not have the program for grades above grade 5, where they should be existing. So there are major issues in terms of implementation, of course, but I'll come to that later. So what's unique about this program from an international perspective? What is very interesting, and something again that came up in the previous discussion, was that it is an extremely low-cost program. So if you just look across different programs that have been implemented, so you have the National School Lunch Program in the US, which again is not to alleviate malnourishment. At some extent, it does, of course, target obesity. It's an extremely expensive program. It's subsidized. Then there was an RCT which was conducted in Burkina Faso, which was looking at providing dry rations as well as lunch. So both were at similar comparable costs, which came to around 40 or 50, between 40 to $50 per child per year. And then there was a Bangladesh program, which was way back in 2000, which was providing rations, which was about $25. And in India, the school lunch program, I would say $10 is sort of an upper limit, and there is, of course, variation across different states. But looking even in urban areas to date, it comes to not more than rupees 2 per child per day, which is extremely, extremely cheap. So there is considerable scope here in terms of putting in more funds and increasing the quality of the program. And of course, the high coverage. You have, as of 2014-15, there are more than 10 crore children who are benefiting from this program. And this effectively makes it the biggest school feeding program in the world. So there are tremendous pluses in terms of just the concept. But taking it to the field, there is still a lot more that needs to be done. But first, let me tell you what the research tells us as of today, whether the program works or not. So when we look at short-term nutrition, so by short-term nutrition, I essentially mean, does the daily nutrient intake of children go up if they participate in the program? And the answer is not obvious, because economic theory would predict that if you make transfers to an individual or to a household, whether it is in kind or it is in cash, the household is going to reallocate resources, in the sense that, you know, if a child is getting meals in school, then when the child comes back from school, I can give the child a little bit less food, and that's how I'm doing a reallocation. So I'm taking away food from the child, because the child has already got this meal from school, and I can reallocate it to other members within the household. So does it mean that getting these meals in school increase the daily nutrient intake, or is there a one-to-one reallocation of resources so that the total daily intake of the child does not get affected in the net at all? So this was one of the things that I was looking at when I was looking at the daily nutrient intake in rural Madhya Pradesh. And what I did find was that there is a positive effect. There's an increase in daily nutrient intake by about 40% to 100%, both in terms of calories as well as other nutrients such as protein. And that was very satisfying, in the sense that, you know, the households are not taking food away from the children in response to this program. There are very few studies which look at cognition. So as I mentioned to you, one of the main objectives of the program really was to alleviate hunger. So is it that a child who's coming to school is going to be able to participate in daily school activities in a manner in such that their educational attainment is better than it would be in the absence of the school meals? So what this study that I'm referring to looks at Delhi, where there was a transition from providing meals just up until grade 5 to grade 6 to 8 as well in 2009. And we used this transition to study how grade 6 students were performing in the classroom before the meals came in and after the meals came in. And we find that there is improvement in the effort and attention within the classroom. There's another study, so there's only one study which actually looks at the long-term health implications in terms of age for height, and what it finds is that school meals in areas in Andhra Pradesh which were subject to droughts, and those kids who had access to the program, their long-term health outcomes were much better, or they're significantly performing better in terms of their anthropometric outcomes as compared to those children who could not access or did not have access to school meals when they were suffering from these shocks. And then, of course, there are a lot of studies which look at school participation outcomes, and they find that there's a significant effect in terms of enrollment, positive effects on enrollment and attendance, particularly for children at younger age groups and for girls. So as of now, as the program exists, given its deficiencies, it's performing in terms of having these positive impacts. But the question that remains then is, can the program do better? So what is really important, we figured in terms of the research that we've done so far, is that the design of the program really matters. So what I mean by design is, first of all, what types of meals are you giving? And of course, here I'm not alluding to whether you're giving eggs or you're giving fruits and you know, things where we haven't got there as yet. So I'm talking about simple things like whether you're giving rations. So there would be still significant parts of the country where you would not get cooked meal on a particular day, and you might have either the ready-to-eat foods or biscuits and so on provided. And we've seen in the work that we've done that both in terms of uptake of the program, you can offer the program to children, but are children going to consume these meals? How do you make the meals attractive to them so that the uptake actually goes up? And uptake does improve if you go from providing these ready-to-eat to providing, so the first transition was from ready-to-eat to single item cooked meals, and we see that there is a significant effect in terms of nutrition. So if you look at this distribution, what essentially is telling you is that if you compare those who are not participating in the program with those children who have these, who are eating this single item menu, so we're looking at exogenous variations in participation. And these are not randomized studies because the program has been implemented all over the country, but you do see that the distribution is shifting to the right slightly, which is telling us that the total calorie intake, the daily calorie intake of those children who are in no program to moving to single item menus, their daily calorie intake was better. When we look at schools which transition from providing ready-to-eat to cooked meals, then there is a convergence in terms of their attendance rates, the monthly attendance rates of students. And this seems to be concentrated in children who are younger, so lower grades, and as I mentioned, also girls. And then there's this transition that's been happening, which has been more slow in the rest of the country, which is going from single item menus to 2-item menus. So by that I mean, having dal, chawal, or roti, sabzi. So making the meals essentially more attractive. So this was again going from looking at non-participants to participants in single item menus to those who are getting Suruchi Bhojan, again in rural Madhya Pradesh, where the new government came in and said, we are going to try to make the meals much more attractive to the children. So you see that the distribution is shifting further to the right. So again, the impact of this in terms of nutritional intakes is in addition to what it was just with single item menus. Another thing that so in terms of variety, in terms of type of meals, it matters what the uptake is, what the impact of the program is. It also seems that timing matters. Do you give them meals in the morning? Do you give them in the afternoon? We find that giving the meals in the morning when the children are more likely to come not having had any breakfast is going to have a bigger impact in terms of not just uptake, but also in terms of outcomes, in terms of cognition. And then there is the issue of infrastructure. There is fundamental concerns about how the program is operating today, given all these bad news that we get in terms of children falling sick or even dying, as it happened in Bihar a couple of years back. So you have two designs over here. One is kitchens, which are in the school premises, on the school premises itself. So it's in-house. And then you have another design, which is you have centralized mechanized kitchens. And the urban areas have typically transitioned, most urban areas, large urban areas such as Delhi, Bangalore, to having these centralized kitchens, which are mechanized, which allow you to cook on a larger scale, which allow you to maintain certain norms in terms of cleanliness and meet nutritional standards. But you have the majority of these schools, which are in rural areas, where the program is expected to have the biggest impacts, where the program is needed much more, where infrastructure is completely lacking. So what do we need to do in order to bolster the infrastructure of the program, both in terms of the kind of the kitchens that exist or don't exist, the storage that's available, the transportation, and then there's the issue of accountability and monitoring. There are still concerns about whether the program is provided on a regular basis, are meals provided every day or not, whether the quality of the meals is sufficient, whether the norms are being met, and so on and so forth. So just to summarize then, the program can be more, so essentially the point that the research, at least in terms of design of the program, tells us so far is that in order to make the program more effective, in order to make the program more attractive, increase the uptake of the program, you have to provide more variety. It's not just enough to do lip service to the program as it exists. less portability, and by less portability, I mean instead of providing food which is ready to eat or single item menus which might be more portable, which make the program less well targeted, would make it more effective, and better timed and regular program would be the need. But we also need to bolster the infrastructure, and for that there could be linkage to existing public programs. For example, the NREGA. One of the objectives of the NREGA is to provide employment. So it's kind of surprising why state governments, or the central government for that matter, has not thought of using these funds for making building kitchen sheds, or using the NREGA to provide additional personnel, so that the burden which is there on the teachers or the existing administration of the schools is reduced. We require state-sponsored or independent audits. So I have done some work on social audits for NREGA program, and it's not a solution to improving the quality of implementation of these programs. We need to a certain extent some sort of independent audits in order to ensure that certain quality norms are met. And then the next step would be fortification. So of course, some states which are already there in terms of ensuring that the quality of the program exists should be going to fortification, and I can see that there's some evidence of that in certain states. But when we look from a national perspective, I feel that there is still a lot more that needs to be done in terms of how the program exists today in order to improve its quality before we can take the next step of discussing fortification, which I think is very, very essential. But I believe we need to take a few steps in terms of consolidating what we have as of today before we can get there. Thank you.